I'm gonna tell you about three different women, two in Texas, one in Georgia. But the story is essentially the same for all three women. All three women were experiencing miscarriage, and they went to the hospital. In this particular instance in Texas with Nevaeh Crane, she goes to the hospital. Her mother takes her to the hospital because she's in severe pain. So they go to the hospital. She's obviously pregnant. She tells the medical staff her symptoms, that she's having abdominal pain, headaches, sweating, fever. But they diagnose her with strep throat and send her home, according to the family and ProPublica, pardon me. The medical establishment at that particular institution did not treat her as a pregnant person. They diagnosed her with strep throat, gave her some antibiotics, sent her home. She goes home. Hours later, same symptoms, but they're getting worse. She goes back to a hospital. She's sitting in the waiting room for hours, 12 hours. 12 hours she's sitting in the waiting room. They finally admit Nevaeh. They realize that she's having a miscarriage, but the baby still has a heartbeat. And this is where this whole thing boils down to, is all three of these women, in this particular case, we're talking about Nevaeh Crane. She was 18. She was experiencing a miscarriage, a legitimate miscarriage. And the medical institution did not want to intervene. The proper intervention would have been to abort the abortion, because it was already in the process of being aborted. She was going through a miscarriage. The fetus would not have been viable outside of the womb. So the proper thing medically would have been to perform an abortion. But because the fetus still had a heartbeat, and in Texas you cannot perform an abortion past 6 weeks if there's a fetal heartbeat. Now, mind you, let me do say this: Texas does have an exception for life-threatening situations. So let's be clear: there is an exception in Texas for situations just like this. However, the medical staff and the professions in Texas have repeatedly, according to ProPublica, have repeatedly let Texas legislators know that the legislation as it relates to abortion and the heartbeat and that whole area is still kind of murky. Excuse me. So these professionals are still actually scared, and they don't really know how to proceed, because there really doesn't seem to be any area for mistakes or misunderstandings, and the penalties are really, really stiff. So in Texas, they'll actually also allow for almost anyone to sue anyone else who performed an abortion, proceeded in an abortion, supported someone. I mean, even like just driving someone to the clinic, you could be sued in Texas. That's how severe these laws are in Texas. So these two women, and this one in particular, we're talking about Nevaeh Crane. She was 18. They knew she was having a miscarriage, right? At least the second hospital knew she was having a miscarriage, and they were just waiting. They were purportedly waiting for there not to be a heartbeat. They did 2 ultrasounds to try to kind of prove that there was no fetal heartbeat, and then it was safe, legally safe, not medically safe, legally safe to perform this procedure. And that's one of the things, doctors shouldn't have to worry about if the procedure that's required is legal or not, if it's actually required and it's life-sustaining and life-affirming. So in these particular instances, these two, that was, according to the medical procedures and medical staff, there's been independent panel put together to investigate these 2 incidents and any other incidences that become discovered, I'll say, right? Because as of right now, there is no agency or a policy that says that, these things are tracked. So the only reason we know about this is because of the good work from those people at ProPublica. Shout out to them and all the good work they just did. Because it took a lot of research and a lot of hours, dedicated hours of combing through information that doesn't directly link to this. For them to find this out and to pull this thread and put the story together, and they did. And so far we know about these two. I'm gonna call them victims, and hopefully that's what they'll be viewed as, victims, because according to the medical board that was put together, it could have been avoided. It was avoidable, and the proper procedure to avoid that would have been to proceed with an abortion. So what happened when both of these women in Texas is, after the baby was delivered, the women developed sepsis, right? They basically got infected because the baby was basically in between being born and not born, almost between being birthed and not birthed for so long. The woman's uterus became infected, and then they died from sepsis, which was avoidable. They were in a hospital setting, and they died from sepsis. So the first woman, like I said again, it was Nevaeh Crane. I definitely want to get to the second woman. I don't want to leave her nameless because she's not nameless. Hold on. The second woman is Josella Barnica. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Rest in peace to both these women. If I haven't pronounced either one of your names incorrectly, I hope the families forgive me. So in this particular situation, it was the same thing. She went to the hospital. She was denied the proper treatment, right? The hospital knew that the proper procedure was to proceed with an abortion, but they didn't because there was a fetal heartbeat. So they waited until there was no fetal heartbeat. It was the waiting in the hospital which caused the sepsis, right? Which caused these women to get sick and then die. And they were waiting not because it was the medically correct thing to do. They waited because they thought that was the legally correct thing to do. And that's a very weird and dangerous, as should be obvious, position for a doctor to be in, to weigh his medical opinion, his medical knowledge and acumen against what's legal and what's not legal. And am I going to get sued? Am I going to go to jail for the rest of my life? Am I going to lose my practice if I do what medically should be done? Both of these women lost their lives, and there is no currently, once again, there is no agency, institution, government-wise, tracking these type of numbers. Once again, the journalists involved in pulling out this story really had to dig it out, and piece this together. And then they had to fly out to the family's house and try to arrange a meeting and confirm what they came up with. These are things that need to be discussed, and that's why we're discussing them. I had to. I didn't see this on CNN. I'm not saying it wasn't on CNN. I don't know where else this story broke. I'm sure at some point it's going to be everywhere, and I don't know how it's going to be covered, but I know how we're going to cover it. We're going to cover it from an independent perspective, because we have open minds. So that was those two women. Then there was a woman in Georgia, right? And this was Jocelyn Barnacki. I know I'm mutilating her name, and I apologize. But that happened in 2001. Nevaeh Crane, I believe, happened in 2002. The next one we're about to discuss, it happened in 2003, and this happened in Georgia. And her name is Amber Thurman. And according to all the medical examiners after the fact, that say that she should be alive they basically came to the same conclusions that the medical experts in Texas came to, which is all three of these women should be alive, and that none of them are alive because the proper medical procedure wasn't taken for legal reasons. So once again, Amber Thurman, she's in Georgia. Now her situation is a little different. She had already undergone what's called a chemical abortion. If you're not familiar with that was, I know I wasn't. A chemical abortion is essentially when a woman takes a chemical of some sort to induce an abortion. A popular chemical abortion remedy is the Plan B. But they have different ones, and they work, I guess, at different stages of the pregnancy. So Amber in Georgia, she took some pills to induce a chemical abortion, and what happened was, unfortunately, the fetus wasn't completely evacuated. Right, I'm trying to find the most civilized way to discuss this type of topic. So the fetus, unfortunately, wasn't completely evacuated from the womb. So she goes to the hospital, and they realize what it is. It's not it's not that that they don't know what's going on. The problem is that I believe it was like 2 weeks prior to this, Georgia had also passed this type of 6-week ban on abortion, and it all stems around a heartbeat. So she gets to the hospital. It's basically she had already induced an abortion, but once again, it didn't completely take or completely evacuate. So what she needed medically is a D&C, and I mean, you can kind of use your imagination to gather what a D&C is. So a woman goes to a hospital or a clinic with a partial abortion, partial meaning that the fetus wasn't completely evacuated from the womb, and they basically need the womb completely cleaned out. And the process of this is called a D&C. So she goes to the hospital needing a D&C. They don't do it, and she gets sepsis. The same thing that the other two women contracted. She contracts sepsis, she dies. So yeah, right. This is an issue that needs to be discussed around what's called reproductive health, right, and how that plays out. Of course, right now, the biggest thing that we hear when we discuss reproductive health is abortion. But it's not just about abortion, and it's not just about the various ways that a woman may need or want an abortion, right? So, in this particular instance, these women needed it, right? They were already experiencing a miscarriage. And one had already induced an abortion. So, we're getting ready to go to a break here, but, these are issues that we're going to cover because this also runs into Project 2025, right? And whether Donald Trump can say that he doesn't know about it and he has no knowledge of it or its creators, but it still exists. And part of that document, they want to completely outlaw, in the Federal Register, that is, the term reproductive health. So these three instances and situations are prime examples of why we need to be having these discussions and why the government has no place in the hospital. They have no place in the hospital room. They have no place in the conversation between a woman and her doctor at all. right? And no, so and this right here, these three examples, unfortunately, are once again prime examples of why the government should not be involved in a woman's health care. So stay tuned. We'll be back. We're gonna play some music. It's 13. This is the other side of America. WXPI Community Radio.